The second half of chapter 10 deals with the unit circle. So today we're going to kind of take what we did and show it how it moves into the unit circle, and then tomorrow we'll really start the unit circle. So the most important key idea in learning the unit circle is that it is a unit circle because it has a radius of 1. Now, how does that help us? Okay, well, we're going to kind of go back to our geometry here, okay, and we're going to talk about 30, 60, 90 triangles. Okay, so we're just going to review here. So if that's a right triangle, and I label this my 30, 60, 90 triangle, and we talk about the fact that this is a unit circle. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of imagine that this triangle is within a circle. Okay, so this would be one of our radii. Okay, so that would have a measure of 1. Well, if you remember from geometry, 30, 60, 90 triangles had a very special relationship. And hopefully you remember that that was 1, the square root of 3, and 2. So now if we think about that, we can talk about the cosine, sine, and tangent now that we have our 30, 60, 90 triangle in a unit of 1. So 30, okay, so if I want to do the cosine of 30, I know cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so I need a over h. So in my triangle here, adjacent is the square root of 3, and the hypotenuse is 2. So the cosine of 30 is the square root of 3 over 2. Now if I go ahead and I do the the sine of 30, okay, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite my 30 is my length of 1, and my hypotenuse is still 2. So I know the sine of 30 is a half. And then tangent is opposite over adjacent. So opposite here is 1, and then my adjacent is the square root of 3. Okay, so now I can kind of go ahead and say, okay, let's start at the 60. So now if I start at my 60, I'm starting at this angle down here. So cosine this time adjacent over hypotenuse is 1/2. Sine of 60 is opposite over, so this time that's the square root of 3 over 2. And tan of 60 opposite from the 60 now is the square root of 3 over 1, which is just the square root of 3. Okay, so 30, 60, okay, 30 and 60 are going to be very important, and 90 are going to be very important angles in our unit circle. So now we know the cosine, the sine, and the tangent, and all of those. These are things you are going to memorize eventually, but I wanted you to realize where they came from. Okay, the other angle that's really important in our unit circle is 45, 45, 90s. Okay, so again, we can imagine this triangle being within a unit circle. So I've got my 45, 45, 90. Again, because it's a unit circle, I know my radius is 1. And if you remember your properties of a 45, 45, 90, that makes my other leg here 1, and then my hypotenuse the square root of 2. So now if I want to find the cosine, sine, and tangent, okay, it doesn't matter because they're both 45, but either way, if I start on this lower 45, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so that's going to be 1 over the square root of 2. Sine is going to be opposite over hypotenuse, which is going to be 1 over the square root of 2. And then the tan is going to be opposite over adjacent, which is 1 over 1, which simplifies to 1. Okay, now before we move on, let's realize that we can't have 1 over the square root of 2, so we would rationalize that by making that times the square root of 2. Multiply straight across, it gives me the square root of 2 over 2. So both the sine and the cosine of a 45 are the square root of 2 over 2. Okay, so those are special to us. So we're going to put it in a table so that we don't forget it or lose it. So we had, if we kind of flip back to the front page, we'll have cosine of 30 is the square root of 3 over 2. The sine of 30 is 1/2. And then we have the tan of 30 to be 1 over the square root of 3. Now, just like we just talked about, you can't have that. So we'll multiply the top and the bottom here. So we'll have the square root of 3 over 3. So that will be our final answer for the tan of 30. 45, we had the square root of 2 over 2 for both sine and cosine, and then the tangent came out to be 1. Cosine of 60 was 1/2. Square root of 3 over 2 was the sine, and then the square root of 3 was a tangent. This table will be memorized. It will make your life much easier if you start committing this to memory. So the video today is pretty short. Make yourself some flashcards tonight. put them in your phone, use an app, I don't care, but these need to be memorized. So that's all there is for today. Really work on memorizing it, and then we'll see if we have any questions tomorrow.